My name is Lisa Brock, and I have the great pleasure of being the facilitator of this panel. Let me introduce you to our workshop panel leaders and the project that they represent. You will be blown away. First, there is Martine Carroll, who is a registered nurse and certified case manager with a background in community organizing, street medic work, and birth work. In 2014, she and one of her best friends started teaching community care response for gunshot wounds. And in 2015, she founded Ujima Medics with fellow organizers in Chicago. Today, she is executive director of that organization and is grateful for the opportunity to build a future for this organization that she loves. She is a graduate of New York University and the Johns Hopkins School of Nursing. She stays inspired by the legacy we will all leave behind for her daughter's generation. Joey McCullom, do you want me to say Joe or Joey in this conversation?
Whichever comes first.
Okay, Joey McCullom is a young Black man born and raised on the southwest side of Chicago and sees himself as a source of violence interruption for his community. Joey currently is the training coordinator at Ujima Medics. He's been a supportive force for Con Vivir, Black Lives Matter Chicago, as well as many other organizations that are centered around disrupting oppressive social infrastructure and norms. And if you see the pictures here, you can see some of the organization members that they work with. Both these folks are leaders in their communities, the Black community in Chicago. I must say that we often hear the right wing say, well, what are Black people doing about Black on Black violence? As if there's nothing happening. There's always been something happening. There's also something happening with this organization in response to police violence of killing Black people. So they are violence interrupters. They are trying to teach the community how and what they can do. And so you won't see them in the news. You might sometime. I think they've been in the news a bit, but you won't see it drummed in that that young people are taking this situation on in our own communities for our own benefit to save lives. So I'm going to turn it over to them to talk about Ujima Medics in terms of what they do, why they do it, and they're going to show you how they do it, first through a short video, and then we'll have another conversation, and then they're going to actually show you a PowerPoint of some of the work they've done. So, all right, I'll turn it over to you all.
Okay, so Lisa, thank you. That was a really good, comprehensive introduction. And let me just make sure you all can hear me okay? Okay, excellent, excellent. And so, yeah, Ujima, the idea for Ujima Medics started kind of a long time ago when I was thinking about, because I was a community organizer for several years, working in Chicago. I did community organizing, labor organizing. I did paid and unpaid work. And some of the experiences I had gave me some skills. And I knew that there needed to be some kind of way, A, to share those skills, and B, to determine how to apply that organizing lens to health work, and to health work as it related not just to individual lives, but to the life of a community. And so what sparked the idea, but for this specific organization, like the way that we do things, one of my really, really close friends and I, we had someone in common who was shot very close to the University of Chicago Hospital, walking distance. And it was a fellow organizer. And so he was shot in the back, and he was a year too old to go to the level 1 pediatric trauma center that was at the University of Chicago Medical Center. So instead, he died in an ambulance on the way to a hospital on the other side of town. And the thing about it is, I don't know how many of you have been to Chicago, how many of you watching have been in Chicago, but it's a big place. And the South Side is a big place. Okay. I realize the way they talk about it in the media seems like it's like a neighborhood. No, it's really big. And at that time, there was no level 1 trauma center on the South Side that had the capability to handle people with severe gunshot injuries, severe traumatic injuries, even something as commonplace as a car accident, right? So even if you're not worried about being shot, you might be worried about where you're going to go should some kind of traumatic injury happen, right? Accidental or otherwise. And so after that, so he was affiliated with a couple of different organizations, had been a leader in his community. And I think because of that legacy, that was a particular spark for a lot of people to figure out, okay, how do we address this systemically? And so what a lot of people did was create the Trauma Center Coalition. Several organizations came together to pressure University of Chicago Hospital to invest in the community that they were in, invest in the community that they studied, and build careers on by reopening an adult level 1 trauma center. And so that fight took several years, but there is now an adult level 1 trauma center at University of Chicago Hospital.
Yeah.
Right? Yay for that. Yeah.
Struggle.
It was a struggle. And that's an important thing to remember. There was a lot of direct action that took place. And by direct action, I mean, like lots of protests, sit-ins, die-ins, messy stuff, okay? Disruptive stuff. Yeah.
This hospital costs millions of dollars. This trauma center, right?
Yeah.
And they had a large reception, that one of the first big opening receptions, and wasn't there direct action? People got tickets and went in to that reception and then had a die-in or something like that.
Yeah.
In front of all the shishi $1 million donors.
Right. So, and that actually matters for what we're going to talk about later in our presentation. But I mean, one point is, sometimes protests work. So we don't keep doing it, sorry. So there's that, right? But also at the same time, as a lot of us knew, and me and my co-founder knew in particular, hopefully she's watching. You watch, hopefully she's watching. But so there's power in pressuring institutions that have that institutional power, that political power, to meet the demands of the public, to meet the demands of the community, right? But there's also power that exists between community members at the level of the street, at the level of that relationship, that we can create justice for ourselves in that moment. And so that's the idea that really led us to create this organization, Ujima Medics. So the term Ujima, UJIMA, is a term that comes from the Kiswahili language, and it's actually the third principle of Kwanzaa. Anybody celebrate Kwanzaa in here? Oh, okay. Yeah, it means collective work and responsibility. And so it was that sense of responsibility that we were feeling, right? As individuals, certainly, but as individuals who were interested in emergency preparedness, individuals who were interested in building power in the community, individuals that were interested in just the idea that we need to create ways for us to help each other, depend on each other, rely on each other, and to strengthen that and to put resources into that. And so, yes, we went on to, so I went away to nursing school actually. And then when I came back from nursing school and got myself together, my first few jobs were a whole lot. Right. So we finally were able to get together, brainstorm, recruit some other folks to come in and help write the first version of what became our basic gunshot first response training, and the first one was in my living room. He was there. And then a few months after that, we taught the first public workshop in 2014. And it was kind of cool because so Ferguson had just went down. And then in Chicago, we were at Chicago Freedom School. And so there was a training on how you monitor police activity. And then we followed it up with the first aid workshop. And so, yeah, you learn first aid, but the first aid is a tool to build power. That's what it is. So, yeah, anything you want to add?
Yeah, just really that part about it. Amika Tadaji, who was aforementioned, at a really young age, opened my eyes to the fatalism that plagues our communities, right? When young folks just see like all we can do is shoot and die, right? It just needed a supplement of some hope, some power, and knowledge, right? That's where the power rests. So like just having the opportunity to give that out in every circle that I can, it's great. Feel the change every day.
And as Brian Stevenson said, which he kind of alluded to our good friend Mariam Kaba, who said hope is she coined the term hope is a discipline. Because sometimes you can feel like there's no hope, but you have to be disciplined.
That's right.
You know, you have to be disciplined in hope. And so you all are bringing that hope through knowledge to the south side of Chicago. So that's cool.
Citywide, actually.
Citywide.
Citywide.
Okay.
And when we go, we do the city, we do the
Suburbs.
suburbs.
Okay.
We've been to Milwaukee, we've been to Cleveland, we've been to Washington, D.C., New Orleans, Seattle.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, we're
All over.
wherever.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, folks want us to come to Waukegan, we'll go there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's good.
Wherever there's a vacuum, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So are you all teaching the other nurses and other medical folks to do this workshop too? Are you training the trainers?
Yeah. So what happens is sometimes we open up membership and people who have previously attended one of our workshops, you know, have opportunity to get involved in the organization. Once you're involved in the organization and our collective, then we have a process by which you'll learn how to teach.
Okay.
And you know, it's open to people who are medical professionals like nurses or the medical students, doctors, whatever your profession is, and open to people who aren't in any kind of medical professional at all, or people who are in a different kind of healing profession. It actually doesn't matter. The point is to organize our people to share and spread these skills. And then once you get involved, we all, you know, put what we know into the pool, because it actually takes more than what you learn in medical school, nursing school, to understand what it is we're doing.
Yeah, because the focus isn't on us, right? It's not on our problem. When you go to medical school, right, they're not teaching you necessarily about how to treat a gunshot wound, right? However, and that, right, that oblivion to our issues can be seen. We see that there's no trauma centers in a 20-mile square radius on the south side of Chicago, right? Yeah, so bridging that gap, right, and letting folks know that there is a void systemically in the missing knowledge that we need to keep our communities going.
So you all have a video to show?
Yeah, we got a couple of videos. The first one that we're gonna show is of a basic gunshot wound workshop that we did on the west side, sorry, at Breakthrough Urban Ministries. They have a bunch of after-school curriculum that they do for the youth out there. Bunch of great programs, honestly, and I love that workshop. The second one we're gonna show is an advanced, where we go over like more special tools. In the basic, we go over improvise, how to use stuff like triangular bandages, tourniquets, impregnated gauze, bunch of stuff.
Collective Black medical professional and community care responders. And what we do is we teach emergency and community care response. that is focused on the particular needs of Black folks in Chicago, and definitely communities that experience the same kinds of health disparities and violence that Black folks do, including our brown indigenous folks as well, okay?
Has a second chest wound because it's located in that area. They may be struggling to breathe, coughing up blood. You may even see like one side of their chest very disproportionate to the other.
Out of all the things that I've taken away, it would be the human shield. So to protect the person from experiencing stress or anxiety from their own situation, calling upon people, giving them orders to create a human shield to keep other people away that might cause unnecessary distraction to the issue.
So for here, I want to be able to prevent this before it happens, all right? Whatever that means, circumstance. And then from here, I'm just going to roll Martine onto this side.
My takeaway is definitely one, being able to call for fire, call 911 and ask for fire versus ask for police, because normally when you call 911, you just automatically seem to call and ask for the police.
So again, that was on the west side at Breakthrough Urban Ministries. It was a basic gunshot wound workshop. The next one we're going to show is an advanced. This was on the south side at the Space Share Lab held by Sacred Keepers. We do this for folks that have attended the basic. We give you a certificate of appreciation, and that's your ticket to the event.
Now, we're gonna stage this, okay? So first of all, we're gonna take this, put it through here, and bring it out about 6 inches, okay? Like this.
Right? Can I help you? You're doing this to check their level of consciousness, right? If somebody yells back, they're awake. Then, once I understand that they're conscious or unconscious, right, I'm gonna get my consent. Hey, can I call 911 for you? Can I get an ambulance for you, right? Can I treat you? Can I treat you? Probably come first. You good.
Here, when I do self-care in order to be there for others, right? I practice community care when I show someone presence, right? Frightening. God's side. All right, I'm gonna grab your hands, okay?
And boom. That's the recovery position, y'all. Yeah.
What is this? It's a plastic bag. What can you use this to treat? A chest wound.
In the navel, we might start to worry about what's called a second chest wound, all right? So here, right, if somebody was shot here, it has a high probability of having pierced what's called the pneumothorax, right? Pneumothorax is what holds the lungs. It's a sac that keeps the pressure, right? So if that is pierced, now we have air rushing in and it's starting to collapse those lungs, the air pressure, all right?
Okay. And after this, there's kind of 2 schools of thought. The main school of thought, this is coming from the manufacturer, is that after about 3 to 5 minutes, solid. And so what you gotta do is pull this out gently. And then you get the fresh part. Now you start putting that. So now you want the chemical to have contact with the blood vessel. Okay? You put that in there, then you gotta get direct contact with that blood vessel. You put that in there for 3 to 5 minutes, and then just pull it out and start over. Okay?
It's all about the love and the intention and the collective responsibility. It's not all about you. It's not like, you know, we're all here to support each other. So collectively, we can keep us safe.
I think my biggest takeaway from today's event is that safety is a group project. I think nowadays, I think that a lot more people are aware that there are ways for us to intervene, like we all can have our lanes and do the work together. I think that we are starting, thanks to a lot of activism, I think we're starting to move away from the whole belief that we've got to wait for a leader or some sort of superhero or Batman to come in and, you know, clean up Gotham City, and realize that we are the cleanup crew, and that there are certain skills that everybody can learn that can help out in a time of need if we're given the right skills, if we're taught them competently, and that we repeatedly practice and kind of internalize. So.
Wow. Safety is a group project. Let's clap. That was great. That was great. You had a child doing it, learning. So anybody of any age can do this, or should know how to do this. Because I think about a lot of kids who are being raised by grandmothers, or kids who have adults in their household who will end up in trouble, and they will need to know how to respond. So I think that was great. And then I had another question from it. He didn't quite go into it. I mean, I think we know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you. Why do you recommend to call the fire department and not the police department?
Okay.
Or to ask for the fire department?
Yeah, so in Chicago, and it's like this in a lot of municipalities, the ambulance service works for the fire department. You know, technically they're firefighters, okay? And in particular, in some places, all firefighters are emergency medical technicians. So if your task is to save someone's life and to get them to a higher level of care as quickly as possible, what you want to make sure you do is get an ambulance on site. And to get to the ambulance, you want to call the fire department. Want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's just a part of being assertive about what kind of care that you need, really. Because also, right, we know that there's a culture in emergency response to like send a police squad car ahead of an ambulance, right? So just even in those 2 seconds that it takes, being assertive in the fact that, hey, this is a medical emergency, we need medical help, right?
Right.
And not just, we also say that in other trainings, not just in the gunshot wound trainings, because sometimes depending on what neighborhood you're in, there's no crime. It's still in the police,
Mhm.
you know, so, you know, we want to ask for the ambulance.
Yeah, because we know that often the police come in thinking there's a crime because it's Black people there.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had situations where people have been shot, even though they needed medical care, you know, mental health care, things like that. Okay, I want to ask you just a little bit especially for our audience and other young people who might be interested in this. How did each of you get into, you said a little bit about how you got into it. Do you have anything else to share? And I'm interested too, and I'd like to hear from you, Joey, as well, about why you do this work, but also what have been some of the challenges, and have you faced any challenges from those folks that are committed to the systemic racism and the systemic infrastructures that you're working against? So I'd like to hear.
Okay, you want to go first?
Well, I got started by my mom and Martine creating the organization, right?
Yeah.
I've been marching since I could walk a mile, and just, you know, picking up knowledge as I go. But recently, I came back from school, right? Flunked out of nursing school, and I was just given the opportunity to be right back in the community that I loved and was a part of so deeply before.
Mhm.
Yeah, just jump back in that water. Who's the second?
Challenge, maybe Martine or either of you, the challenges you faced.
The challenges for me, and I mentioned before, right? The other reason is that the fatalism that plagues our communities. Before I graduated from elementary school, I had friends getting arrested in my classroom, people getting shot in my school by students of the same school. We had, I like come out of school and can't go home because I find out that there's all types of shootings or whatever was going on. So really just like seeing a whole lot of walls and knowing that there's a glass ceiling somewhere, right? And the challenges arise out of that same kind of picture, just because like when you go talk to those homies, they don't want to hear nothing you got to say. They got their answer, right? It's not the answer that I'm settling for, but it's the one that they got, right? So really just pulling through and really trying to pull for that one string to let you know, like, hey, this is another way, you know what I mean? Or it's a way to aid you on yours, right? Yeah, just fighting that fatalism, really.
Okay. And what about the system? Have you all ever had any challenges as a police or trauma centers been upset with your work?
Not directly.
Okay.
Not directly. You know, if they have any negative feedback, it hasn't necessarily made its way over to us, you know. You know, we actually have some allies, you know, in some of the larger medical institutions, because they understand why we do what we do. They understand the importance, and very specifically, they understand the limits of what institutional power can do. Right. And sometimes I think we believe that power is one thing, one very specific thing, and only certain people have it. And we believe and we practice that that's not the case, you know? So, yeah. And sometimes, you know, we interact with even police officers and, you know, found that sometimes they don't even know, you know, how to treat a gunshot wound, you know? So no, we haven't come up against anything, you know, yes, I'll just put it that way. But as far as challenges though, so one thing is the fact that we are not from an institution. For some people, that's a problem. For some people, it's a problem that it's not just me leading the trainings. For some people, it's a problem that, you know, sometimes you'll have a teenager in high school and thank you. And maybe like an emergency medical technician leading the workshop together, right? And the thing that they don't understand is the process of building together, and the process of because, you know, a lot of organizing groups do base building, right? one of the ways we do base building is by teaching our people how to teach this, you know, and that's a leadership development piece, and that's a power building piece. And so, and honestly, you know, one thing we say is that the point of this, we're trying to transmit skills, absolutely. And we're trying to transmit skills accurately. And several of us have used these skills in the field, right? But we really hope that people who come to our workshops don't actually have to use some of those skills. But what we do hope that they use, we believe that they'll use, is what they come out believing based on what happens in the workshop, right? So that's the most important thing. And so, one of the challenges is, well, what qualifications do you have to teach, right? Although, like, we do a lot of internal, what people would recognize as like continuing education with our members. You know, everybody CPR AD certified, and like a couple of people went to like a 5-day long training, like we do a lot of that stuff for folks, you know what I mean? So yeah, we do have a lot of like recognized you know, training. But you know, what we're trying to move away from is the idea that only certain types of people have the authority to hold information that can, you know, save our lives and make our communities better. And one other challenge I'll share too is sometimes the issues we face can seem, you know, like Brian Stevenson was saying, right? Kind of insurmountable. And when there's so many things happen, when you were facing not just, you know, this issue with people being shot, you know, asthma, you got lead poisoning, you got, you know, HIV/AIDS, you got, you know, cancer, and you just have, you know, so many issues, right? Overdoses and mental health. And one of our challenges sometimes is, what do we focus on? Where do we actually concentrate our energy? You know, where are we most needed? And I think one thing he was saying earlier is we try to look for where there's a gap that exists and seek to fill that gap. So if there's something already happening that we admire, okay, well, that will, you know, yes, Black people need such and such, but this group is already doing that. Let's support them and figure out, you know, what else needs to happen.
Right. Yeah, that's, you know, because we have a culture of this notion of expertise, which means that very often especially in the medical industry, so very often the whole person, or a lot of gaps can happen because you may have 10 experts, but you got 20 problems. You know, you got 10 experts on 10 things, but you got 20 problems. So, you know, but those 10 experts can't see the other problems because they're focused on their own particular expertise. And that ends up being a problem, I think, as well, in a lot of our society, this individualism, this expertise issue. But you all also now, so you have a PowerPoint you want to share as well?
Yeah, we have so what we're going to do is
are you going to do a demo first or after?
Yeah, it's part of it.
Okay.
It goes hand in hand.
Yeah, okay.
So we can get into that. So we can actually pull that up. And so what we're going to do right now is a preview to 3 of our workshops. So you can see like kind of pieces of it. Okay, yeah, so here we go, workshops preview. I mean, not saying right in front of Lisa. Okay. So as far as our current offerings, so you saw videos from our gunshot wound first response workshops, which, you know, we want to prepare people to be able to know what, if they're in a situation where they have to respond to a shooting. In our basic, you learn, you know, how to extend someone's chance of survival, using tools that you have to improvise, and also trying to reduce opportunity for emotional injury. The advanced workshop builds on that. We also offer seizure community care, which has become important in terms of, you know, people witnessing someone having a seizure and wanting to, you know how to care for that person. You know, protest defense for Black street medics. That's a cohort-based training where people who would like to learn how to serve as first aid volunteers, for people participating in direct action, fighting for justice, to be able to do that with the focus on the needs of Black people that are in the streets. and also the needs and desires of Black people who want to serve them, right? And then we're going to show you a little bit from our asthma community care workshop. And that's all about how we all support our people who live with asthma. You know, whether or not you have asthma or not, that's not the issue. The issue is we all need to know. You're going to see some of that. The protest for health and safety is not necessarily for people who want to be, per se, volunteers. That's tips on safer participation in direct action and some knowledge about what you can expect from street medics who might be at your action. And then the community safety planning workshop is actually done online. And it's about creating empowered bystanders. That image you see is from one of our internal for you medics members, CPR, AED, first aid certification. That's Raven teaching the class. Okay, so but before we hop into that, we have a few things we want to say.
So our workshops are created mostly through struggle and experience. All right. All that being said, we're not teaching y'all how to be surgeons. We're not teaching our peers how to be doctors, no nurses. None of our workshops are going to be your pinning ceremony. I'm sorry. However, we do train y'all on the skills that are needed to respond to the emergencies that are prevalent in our neighborhoods. And with that, right, so if you're responding to an emergency, we also encourage that you let doctors do what they got to do. You know what I mean? If you see a nurse, let them do what they got to do.
Okay. And a couple other things too is we recognize for those who are here present and then those who are joining online, some of the information we're going to cover could be a little unsettling, could potentially be triggering for folks. And we recognize that. We want you to revere your own wellness, okay? And understand the purpose is to provide some skills we can all use to keep each other safer. If you need to step away, if it's becoming too much, we understand, okay? All right, and so before every workshop, we take a moment to recognize the fact that the reason why we know what we know, and even the people who taught us what we know what they know, is due to some degree of suffering by a lot of people, okay? And a lot of that suffering contributed to us having these skills and being able to care for each other, but we never forget that. We always acknowledge that. And we always thank those who took the time to teach us. Even the people in our workshops, right, always teach us. So we're gonna take a moment just to allow people to breathe with us, to either speak out loud if you want, or hold the name of your heart, someone who inspired you to come to this workshop today, or someone, for those of you who are doing work about health justice, to do that work. Two names that we often offer into this space are that of Damian Turner and Baba Hannibal Afrique. So in this moment, people are welcome to contribute your own names.
I'm gonna call the name Patrick Hall.
Patrick Hall.
I'm gonna call my mama. I'm gonna call my grandmother, Mama Lou.
Mama Lou.
Oh, shit.
I shared all those names, those who were spoken and those who you held in your hearts. I'm going to invite breath right now. If everybody could, even those who are joining online, you might want to do this. Just, we're going to take 2 breaths. One in, you're going to hold it, release it, and then in again, hold and release. So starting now. And release. And then again. And release. And usually we ask people to stand for this part, but it's all right. At this point, I'm also going to try to get a sense and have people reflect on their experiences. We try to breathe before every workshop, but it's particularly nice before our asthma workshops. So I'm going to read a statement. If it applies to you, you can either say, "That's me" out loud, and you can move your body forward and then back. Ready? I know someone who has asthma.
That's me.
I have asthma. I've seen someone struggle to breathe before. That's me.
That's me.
I have lost someone to asthma.
That's me.
Mm. I've been afraid to ask a doctor an important question before.
That's me.
That's me.
Mm. I've been afraid to call 911 before.
That's
That's
me.
me.
Mm. I'm afraid of being in the presence of police.
That's me.
I am confident that I will be treated well by local emergency health services should I need them. Oh, okay. Okay. I have been nervous about going to a march or rally or other protest about an issue that I believe is important. Yeah.
That's me.
That's me.
Yeah. I want to learn more skills to make informed choices in difficult situations. That's me. Okay, thank you for participating in that. And thank you for your vulnerability and trust in participating in that. Okay, so we're going to move to, oh, we were supposed to do that. That's me, okay. So at this point, we're also going to talk about our first aid principles, okay? And we try to open up all our workshops with some grounding in this, okay? And we use our name UMedics to help, with this acronym. So it's UMedics. We ask for some participation in the audience. I'm gonna, ask you to say this with me. So our first principle begins with you. Say, you understand how we feel.
Understand how we feel.
Ask for consent.
Ask for consent.
So what you want to do is take a moment to assess your own self. If there is something going on, am I going to actually step in to assist? Or do I need to just keep my own self safe, those who I'm directly responsible for, and make an exit? So assess your own self. Okay, what do you need? That's why we say understand how we feel. So now moving on to how the person you want to help feels, the person you want to help feel. You want to ask for consent. You would actually tell them if you have any sort of training. If you're a doctor, say, I'm a doctor, right? Oh, okay. We have training in first aid. I know some first aid. I know CPR. Or I'm your neighbor. I want to help you, whatever it is, right?
Right.
And don't misrepresent your credentials, because if you do, you don't have real consent, okay? Now, if they say no, and they might say no, we at UMedics believe in respecting a no, okay? Doesn't mean we're just going to be like, all right, fine, okay? But I mean, maybe, depending on their attitude, I don't know. But if they say no, you can stick around. They might change their mind and be like, you know what, actually, yeah, he helped me. Or you can say, listen, you said no, I'm going to be right over here if you need me, okay? So you have some options if they say no. Next one is M. Say M.
M.
Movement only when necessary.
Movement
only when
necessary.
Cool. So this means that you treat them where the injury happened, whatever happened, where it happened, unless there's a reason to move. Okay, unless it's more dangerous for them to stay right there. So what that means is, let's say I'm injured by a gunshot wound, okay, and I fall down right here. Don't try to move me from right here unless I'm in danger from being right here, okay? If you can treat me right here, do it right here. However, when we go into our asthma workshop, you'll learn that cigarette smoke can trigger an asthma attack. So if I'm in a smoky room having an asthma attack, definitely move me, okay? So consider whether or not you should move them or not. Next one, say E. Examine.
Examine.
But do no harm.
But do no harm.
So we're trying to figure out what's going on with them, why they're ill, why they're in distress, where they're injured, okay? And then what do they need and what can you do to help them? But you really want to, as much as possible, especially given the culture we're in, remove your ego from this. Keep the focus on what they need. And that brings us actually to our next one. Say D.
D.
Don't go out of your scope.
Don't go out of your
scope.
So all you have to do is what you know how to do and what you've been trained to do. And that's all we want. And that's all we expect. Now it's not the time to just try out something you saw last night on Grey's Anatomy. We're not doing that. Okay, just do what you know how to do. You'll be fine. Next one, let's say
I.
injuries,
Injuries,
emotional and physical,
emotional and physical,
must be treated.
must be treated.
So as we know, fear can possibly make some symptoms worse, okay? And so what we want to do is speak life into that person, help them believe they're going to survive, help them believe they'll be better. You can do that with what you say. You can do that with how you behave and just your calm presence, okay? So we want to be able to provide that first aid, but some of that first aid is all about, your approach, your calm, and your love. C, collective responsibility.
Collective responsibility.
So although earlier you heard me say, I felt responsible, I know stuff, people should know stuff, right? The reason why people were dying in Chicago gunshot wound wasn't just my fault, right? And so what happens sometimes in our workshops, people come and they say, if only I knew this 6 months ago then, or 2 years ago then. And what we try really hard to do, and this is why we only do our workshops, our gunshot workshops in person. We don't do it in person. We want to hold space for that. We want to actually disrupt that narrative that starts to run through people's heads and hearts and say that as a community member who's responding, you're the first, it's called first aid, the first in a chain of responders. You're going to be there with that person and be able to hand them off to someone with a wider scope. And then they may hand them off to even somebody else. And even some of the best surgeons, for example, can't save everybody, okay? The important thing here is that the conditions and the reasons that lead to what you're encountering on the street, someone being shot, someone having trouble breathing, right? Someone having a diabetic emergency, that's a collective responsibility of the whole society that we have to figure out how to solve together. So it's not just on you. Just because you have these skills now doesn't mean that you're responsible every time someone is harmed, okay? By coming to the workshops, by participating, you're actually helping build a future where we can have less of this, okay? Collective responsibility. Finally, S. Scene safety.
Scene safety.
It's really important to us that you keep yourself safe first, okay? So before you move in to help someone, make sure it's safe for you to do so. We're going to get into this a lot more a little bit later. So that's how we preface most of our workshops. So let's start with our asthma workshop. We start by defining asthma for folks, letting them know chronic condition, meaning it can last for years or for a lifetime, that causes inflammation. So that's like heat and irritation, constriction. So that's going from big to small, and obstruction, meaning something's in the way of the airways. So when we say airways, we mean the pathway tubes that connect the mouth and the nose to the tube that leads air to the lungs. And then the lungs do their thing and send that air back out. We're breathing in and out, right? We want those airways to be open and clear. And in asthma, sometimes we have the opposite. So what I was supposed to do was ask you all to think about some things that may trigger an asthma attack. Instead, as you can see, there's lots of things, so many things. But I'm curious to know if that person in the audience who said that they do have asthma wouldn't mind sharing, if there's anything that looks familiar to you that's actually a problem for your asthma condition. Is there anything on here? Yeah, so this person said that smoke can trigger her asthma attack, and then allergies to some people's pets can trigger that as well. And so, yeah, allergies, from seasonal allergies to animals to food allergies can trigger asthma attacks. Environmental conditions such as heat, like weather extremes, really hot, really cold, living conditions like a moldy apartment that a landlord won't fix, infections like COVID-19, the common cold, the flu can trigger an asthma attack. Stress isn't talked about enough as something that can trigger someone's asthma. And also exercise, right? Strenuous physical activity, sometimes beyond what someone's used to, but maybe someone's normal physical activity, can trigger an asthma attack. So these are things we want to be aware of as, community members. What kinds of things are we causing our loved ones with asthma to encounter? So, you all are at the ASALH conference, those who are in the house, but, we really want to talk about why this matters, okay? So, over 25 million people in the United States are affected with asthma, according to the CDC. And for most of those people, death isn't common. But let's look at the condition of Black people, because we have higher rates of visits to the ER. For asthma, Black children in Chicago are 2.5 times more likely to have to visit the ER for asthma. About 1 in 4 Black children in Chicago has an asthma diagnosis, okay? And I suppose for us, it seems normal. It's not normal, okay? Also, Black women are at highest risk of dying of asthma. And then people with lower household incomes are more likely to have asthma. So we want to talk about this to bring attention to the fact that this is not just an issue for the individual with asthma, for that one family that has someone with asthma. It's an issue for all of us because these are all systemic causes and conditions. So it's important for us in our workshops to make sure the participants understand that it's not just about the asthma attack. Those are late signs that something's wrong. We can recognize something coming if we know what the early signs are. What's an episode look like? An episode can go on for a week. They start having these issues, and then it ends in an attack. So what are early signs? So they're having symptoms of a cold or allergy, right? And as we know, that can lead to something, but it doesn't always happen right away. They've got a headache, a stuffy nose, a sore throat, right? It's happening for days in a row. They start coughing, maybe they're wheezing, and sometimes they'll have trouble sleeping. For several nights in a row, they're waking up coughing, and they're having to use their emergency inhaler. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but a lot of people with asthma are prescribed something like this, right? And they use this when they're having trouble breathing. People shouldn't be having to use this days in a row, and especially at night when they're trying to sleep. If that's happening, that's not normal, okay? So they're having difficulty sleeping. And then maybe, your loved one is generally kind of, happy-go-lucky, or they're kind of chill. Now they're irritable, and everything is bothering them. And you're like, man, you get on my nerves. Well, maybe they're getting on your nerves because they're having all these early signs and it doesn't feel good. They're having trouble breathing. Maybe that's a sign that we should be concerned, right? Can we go back to the slide? Thank you. And then finally, perhaps maybe they can, walk a block, no problem. But for some reason, after all this is going on, they walk a block and they're really tired. And you might see them doing what the sister's doing in the picture. We call this tripod. That's a way for her to maximize how much oxygen her body is getting, okay? So they're doing this after an activity that usually doesn't bother them. So then these early signs can progress to late signs, to an asthma attack, potentially. So rapid breathing. They're anxious because they can't breathe. I would be anxious too. Having trouble talking is actually, I'm gonna say it's kind of a bad sign. Okay, they should be able to talk. If they can't talk, we have a problem. If they have numbness and tingling in their feet and their hands, that's an indicated problem. And then let's say they use their asthma inhaler, the symptoms won't go away, they're getting worse. Big problem. Okay. So what do you do? So let's go over a few things. So one, can y'all repeat after me? Let's say spread calm.
Spread calm.
And that starts with you, your sense of calm. And you want to kind of infect them with your calm. You want to spread that to them. And so let's say my friend here is having trouble breathing and I'm noticing. So what I might want to do is be like, hey, you want to remember your first aid principles. Hey, you all right?
Oh, I ain't feeling so good.
Okay. You know, I know first aid. Can I help you?
Yes, please.
Okay. Why don't you come over here and sit down? Come sit down. So maybe you want to assist them to sitting down. If you maybe assist them to a tripod position. So maybe have them position their elbows here on the knees. If they're looking down, you want them to be looking up, okay? And maybe you can help them pace their breathing if they're breathing rapidly. So, you know, guiding their breathing to match yours. You can do that. What you also want to do is ask them if they have asthma. You have asthma.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know the problem. Okay, and then we want to find out if they have an inhaler. You have an inhaler.
Yeah, I got it right here.
Okay, good. Now let's say his inhaler was all the way over there. I would go get his inhaler and then you just hand it to him. Generally, he knows how to use it. Okay. Now, some people with asthma, if they have a really good support system, if they have a good relationship with a primary care doctor, they might have something called an asthma action plan. Y'all say asthma action plan.
Asthma action plan.
Right. Okay. So in the asthma action plan, that is created collaboratively between a doctor and a patient. And that says, if this person's having trouble breathing or something's going on, these are the steps you follow. It's good for everybody to have one, right? But a lot of people don't have one. Some people don't even have a primary care doctor. Okay. Now, if they have one, follow the directions. If they don't, you know, again, we want to try to get this inhaler. I'm going to talk in a minute about, well, what if you don't have one? We're going to talk about that. Okay. Now, he has his inhaler, but let's talk about how you use it. A lot of people are actually prescribed an inhaler and not ever instructed the proper way to use it. And in our workshops, we actually recommend that when they get that inhaler, they talk to the pharmacist. The pharmacist can actually teach you how to use it, right? But what you do, you get the inhaler, and if our slide was up, you would see, this is fine. In the image, there's a picture of an inhaler that looks a lot like this, okay? And so let's say it's the first time you're using this. Give it a shake, shake, shake. Take the cap off, okay? And you want to prime it for use. You point it away, spray, spray, okay? Twice. And then what they're going to do, you want them to exhale completely. And then after they exhale, they're going to put their mouth on the mouthpiece. I'm not going to actually do that, but let's pretend like this is my mouth. So you're going to put your mouth on the mouthpiece and then press down on this, and then the spray comes out and I breathe it in. Inhale, and often in the prescription there's 2 puffs. Inhale, and what you're going to do is hold that, okay? As long as you can. 10 seconds will be nice, okay? Then you can breathe out. And again, depending on the prescription, you may need to do that right away again, or we wait, okay? I'm going to talk in a minute about what that waiting is all about. Now, very importantly, this cap goes back on here, okay? Why? If I put this in a bag like this, any old thing, crap can get in here. And then I go to use my inhaler, and the crap that was in here is now in here. We don't need these problems, okay? Back. The medication that many of these have in common, or have in common, is called albuterol sulfate. It's not hard. Say it with me. Albuterol.
Albuterol.
Sulfate.
Sulfate.
Albuterol,
Albuterol.
sulfate.
Sulfate.
That's the one that a lot of these have in common. Also, not all of these are blue. Okay. Sometimes they're red. Sometimes they're orange. It'll depend on the color. Okay. To know if it's the emergency inhaler or not. Okay. You want to ask the person or you want to figure out what the drug is. Albuterol sulfate. Okay. Also, you can hear me? Yeah. Cool. There's something called a spacer. A lot of kids have spacers. It attaches to the mouthpiece and it just helps them to get in the medication more easily. And it's nice for grown folks too. Okay. So that's a quick lesson on using an inhaler. But let's say I ask them, you got your inhaler?
No.
No. And you know what? That is often the answer. Okay. So what can you do? So one, you want to figure out where we're at in these symptoms. Are we in the early symptoms? Or are we in the late symptoms? Okay. If we're in the early symptoms, perhaps doing a couple things such as having him get some room temperature water, get that water, and don't gulp that. I need you to sip that water slowly, right? No ice water, okay? We want to sip room temperature water, okay? The other thing that might help is coffee. No iced coffee, okay? Room temperature coffee, even hot coffee can actually help folks. If you don't have time to brew no coffee, okay, you can't get to the McDonald's or the Starbucks, actually it's getting some coffee grounds, taking the cap off, bringing that in, can actually help stabilize some people, okay? So if we're in early symptoms, they don't have an inhaler, you can try that potentially, but you really want to try to get your hands on what their inhaler. So maybe we're driving them home and we're doing the coffee or sipping the water or what have you, right? I'm not an expert in acupressure. There's also acupressure points that can assist with this as well. And we do get into that in the full workshop. However, if they're in late symptoms, we might need to do a little bit more than that. Okay, maybe this whole coffee and water thing, we're doing that while we're on the way to the ER. Okay, so quickly though, if they're at home, they might actually have a machine sits on the table called a nebulizer. A lot of kids have this. If they breathe in a medicated mist, helps them feel better, soothes the airways. Some people, they wear a mask so they don't have to do all the shaking stuff, okay? Some, you can take them with you, they're portable. And a lot of them use the same medication as the inhaler. So let's say they took their inhaler, okay? We can wait about 5 to 10 minutes before the next dose if the symptoms are still going on. Take it again, wait 5 to 10 minutes. You can do it up to 3 times, okay? What we're looking for is those symptoms to calm down. We're looking for, if they couldn't talk before, now they can. They couldn't walk before, now they can, okay? But if those symptoms are staying the same or getting worse, okay, we tried that. We need to call 911, get an ambulance over here, or we need to get you to the ER. We're not playing games. They can't breathe, okay? Now, again, episode can go to an attack. So if they don't have their inhaler and we're in a situation, a lot of folks are concerned, right? They're like, and this is the thing about it. Sometimes we talk to folks from other countries and they're like, wait a minute, so you're telling me that people are afraid to get on the ambulance because they're broke? And we're like, actually, yeah, right? Our thing is like, look, if they can't breathe, you afraid of the ambulance bill? We can do GoFundMe, okay? But let's save this life. And in Chicago, our friends at the fire department let us know that if the ambulance comes, you get your medication, you feel better, you don't have to get on that ambulance and go to the hospital. Often that bill comes to you when you get in the ambulance and ride it to the hospital, okay? So that's another tip we pass on. But look, if I ask somebody, do you have asthma? And the answer is,
No.
I don't know what's going on, okay? So in that case, we recommend you take them right to the ER, call 911. They don't have that inhaler, they can't talk, they can't walk, they can't play, they're wheezing. Go to the hospital, call 911. Okay? Wait time is over. Now, if it's a child having trouble breathing, they have a condition called muscle retractions. We're going to show you next slide. So you might want to take off their shirt and see how hard they're working to breathe. If you see this thing we're going to show you in a minute, go to the hospital. Also, and it happens to Black people, trust me. If their fingertips are blue, their mouth is blue, oh no, they're actually in some trouble here. Please go to the ER, go to the hospital, call 911. Okay, whatever is the quickest thing, because we need to get them help immediately. My new favorite word, expeditiously. Okay, now, muscle retraction. So on the left, same baby, that's probably an exhale, okay? But on the right, if you look at that red arrow, it's showing you the baby's ribs. See how they're being sucked in like that? That means this baby's probably in a lot of trouble. If you got a baby at home, you're babysitting, the child is kind of coughing, having trouble breathing, and you look at their chest that's doing that, take the baby to the hospital. What are we gonna do? Take
the baby to the hospital.
Thank you. Okay, cool. So we don't want to see this. We see this, it's an emergency. And so that's part of our asthma workshop. We go into a lot more about medications, treatments, scenarios, different practice things to get people thinking about how to support those in their community. We talk about environmental justice organizing, but we want to leave people with this concept of creating a community care plan for people in your lives that have asthma. So what we want to think about a few. One, who are the people in your life that have asthma? Co-workers, friends, neighbors. Who are those people? What are their triggers? If you have somebody in your family who's allergic to shellfish, you having a big old shrimp dinner, and it's a really, really hot day, right? These are like multiple things that can trigger asthma. So you want to think about these things in order to better care for people. Do they have an albuterol inhaler for emergencies? If they don't, how can we get them one? And unfortunately, it's harder than you might think it is, right? Do they have a relationship with a doctor? How can we find one? So they have an inhaler, right? Where do they keep it? They don't carry it. Why don't they? Perhaps if they knew this isn't a burden they got to carry by themselves, they might be more likely to actually carry it. Let you know where it is. Do they take other herbal or prescription medication to control their condition? Do doctors' visits make them nervous? If so, can you go with them next time? Help them talk to their doctor about asthma action plan? And finally, talk about this before there's an emergency. How do they feel about calling 911 or going to the hospital? And then which hospital might they feel comfortable going to in the event that they are having an asthma attack? Okay, so I'm going to hand it off to Joe to get into our next preview.
Thank you, Martine. So if I was a person with asthma at a direct action, and I started to feel like I was under respiratory distress, you can't call an ambulance, right? You got a direct action. How are they gonna get to you? So who you gonna call? Street medic. I don't own the copyrights to that melody. Please don't strike me. Street medics are folks that are trained and accountable to a multitude of collectives and organizations across the country. Their job is to be at direct actions, whatever that direct action might look like, to spread calm, ensure the safety of the folks volunteering at that direct action, the organizers, right? And also to support in any efforts towards mitigating risk.
Okay, so
We have about 5 minutes. before we're gonna take some Q&A and we have some from the live stream as well.
Okay, cool.
Speed round, watch this. Can I see that slide right quick? Thank you. So street medics are usually trained for at least 20 hours, right? You might go to a 24-hour training over the span of 3 days. Here you learn many of the jargons, right? The ways to respond in the case of an emergency and how to support, like I was just saying. These aren't necessarily government recognized, right? State recognized certifications as street medics because we're doing work to prevent the state from disrupting the work that our folks is doing out here, right? We're usually associated, like I'm saying, with direct actions. A direct action can mean protests, marching down the street with 1,500 people, or a vigil with 15 people, right? Both have their own sets of risks, depending on the circumstances. Both might require a street medic. Some terms for a street medic, right? On-duty street medic looks like somebody that is dressed, recognizable as a street medic, right? You might see big old medical crosses, street medic written on them. Some people wear bike helmets and really highlight their outfits to let folks know. But an on-duty street medic is always usually gonna have a buddy, right? It's honestly in their best interest to have a buddy, right? Because their job is to mitigate risks. You need that buddy to mitigate the risk for that street medic, okay? You might not see a medic with a buddy if they're at something like jail support, right? You don't always need a buddy, but a dressed medic will have a buddy, all right? So if you see one, look for the other. The levels of risk that I'm talking about are color coded: green, yellow, red. Green means you have a very low risk of getting arrested. I myself have shown up at a vigil, right? That you should have no risk of getting arrested, right? But then, right, it happened to be somebody that was shot by the cops, and you have Blue Lives Matter folks showing up angry for whatever reason, right? And then folks are getting arrested, hurt. Street medics are here to support you through any level of risk, okay? Because that green, in my situation, instantly turned into a yellow and a red, right? Without even me knowing it. It was never organized to be that way. A yellow just means that the action that we're doing, right, is not meant to cause folks to get arrested, because that can be a strategy, right? However, just because of the nature of the action, there's a higher risk of you getting arrested. Red means that the action that we're going to, you're probably going to see a lot of folks get arrested, a good number of folks, so you should just be ready for that. Because of these levels of risk, we encourage folks to practice what we call situational awareness. This just literally means being aware of your situation, what's going on around you, the street signs on the corners, right? Cardinal directions, maybe if I'm at a place where I can't necessarily see exactly where I am. Helping your other folks be aware of where y'all are in y'all social situation, right? How risky is this for everybody? And how can I mitigate that risk? Situational awareness becomes tactical awareness when I need to do something about my situation, right? When I need to become more tactile. We use this acronym SLAM: stop, look, assess, and manage. Stop and look is more like the situational awareness part, but the assess and manage, when you're actually doing something, hey, communicating to your buddy, I see this going on, this is how we should respond, right? That's the tactical awareness part. But in both, you're really just being aware of the fact that, right, if you're at a protest, that you're at a protest with whatever level of risk it is, and just being ready to respond in those manners. In tactical awareness, right, if I was on the block, walking up the street, right, and they started shooting, danger has been presented, right? I'm a person that knows how to respond to this. So maybe I'm not just gonna escape, I might wanna run and hide behind something, okay? One thing that we teach folks in our workshops is that there's two kinds of protection in terms of hiding behind stuff. One is cover, one is concealment, okay? Cover is where you're gonna hide behind something that is in terms of gunshots, right? I'm gonna hide behind this thing. Maybe it's not gonna totally cover me. Somebody will probably be able to see me. However, the average bullet won't be able to penetrate. Concealment is gonna be the opposite, right? A person is probably never gonna be able to see you behind this thing. However, the average bullet will probably be able to penetrate, right? Or whatever danger is presenting itself, probably gonna find you behind, okay? We have some practice. We got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So a fire hydrant, right? Super small, thick, compact metal though. If you hid behind a fire hydrant, that would be considered cover, okay? Because everybody on the street can see you. However, if a bullet were to hit that sliver, right, of protection, it probably wouldn't go through. The hood of a car has the engine. If I hid beside the hood of a car, I have cover, right? Somebody might see you. A tree. This tree is kind of huge, right? It might provide a little bit of both. The average bullet won't be able to penetrate, and you might be able to hide. A door, that's just concealment, right? These stairs might be considered cover. Who knows?
Yeah, so we can actually go over this after the Q&A if you want.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. So now we're gonna open up for questions and comments, although I must say, your talk about protests during the summer of 2020, when there was so much action in most cities, in the city of Chicago, my husband and I were faced with a situation where we were in a driving protest because of COVID, but a lot of people were on the street in front of Trump Tower down at downtown Chicago. And it was, you know, people that they were trying to get to Trump Tower. The police were tear gassing and all of that kind of thing, and also hitting people. And so we turned a corner on Michigan and Randolph, and these two young girls, 3 of them actually, said, "Can you take my cousin to the hospital?" And we look up, and there's a girl there with her nose completely broken. And I mean, that was my assessment. She was bleeding. And so we, you know, threw them in the car and took them to Northwestern emergency room. But we were faced with this issue of COVID too, because we put 3 strangers in our car, but we assessed the risk and said it's more important to help this girl than to deal with COVID. Yeah, they were like 17-year-old girls, and this was their first protest. And she got hit in the nose with the billy club by a cop, broke her nose. And she was like 17, from the suburbs, had never been in a demo, but this was her first one. So anyway, those things can be very, very dangerous. I'm aware of that. So we have someone with a mic in the audience. If someone has any questions, please let us know. Raise your hand. We have a question here. And then I have a couple that I'm going to raise from the internet audience.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the presentation. I'm wondering if you guys have done any workshops or had any conversations with some of these street organizations, because you alluded to, like, the Brothers on the Street already have their answer. They're not looking to stem the violence, but they would seem like they would need some of these skills or be interested in these skills. So I'm wondering if that conversation has happened at all, or what that reception is like.
I say that, like, it's always a work in progress. In like when and I can speak from a Chicago context in terms of like streets, gangs kind of stuff. Our gangs have always been like hand in hand with the fight for justice in the community. At different times, different eras, right? They stray farther and closer. But as long as you have a solid plan, folks are usually able to get with it. So recently, we've done a lot of work, like trying to reach out, like really ground level, right? Apartment buildings, literal like street corners, parking lots, reaching out to these folks and like being like, yo, y'all see the need, right? So let's like start having those conversations. So to answer your question, it's really about conversation building. And again, pulling on those strings of experience. My aunt, who is Carla Johnson, who's a champion for going out into the streets and like recruiting folks from the streets to learn these life-changing, life-saving skills. She told me, man, it takes for like her homies to see the need, right? And then have that conversation again with her after to be like, yeah, no, we really need that.
Martine, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you did a good job. And one thing I think also is there's been a lot of shifts as far as how street organizations are organized in Chicago. And so perhaps, you know, about 20 years ago, it would have been a little bit simpler to just kind of go to a couple people and then be able to spread it around. These days is a little bit different. And so I think that's one thing to understand about the context has changed a little bit. One thing I'll say also is that, like, seriously, like the training we do is for everybody. And I think that, you know, one of the challenges definitely is related to, like, you know, this idea that, you know, what people do and don't deserve and what people do and don't want to know, and related to, you know, what people can and can't do. They got to have the capacity to know and understand. So, I mean, one thing that we've been doing also is trying to reach out to people who are incarcerated and reach them while they're there to hand on these skills. And so that's one way that we do reach folks that are probably involved in some degree of, like, either, you know, perpetrating or party to some kind of perpetration of gun violence. Although I do want to make sure I also say that not everybody who is affiliated or part of a street organization is a perpetrator of gun violence. I want to make sure I say that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we have a couple of very interesting questions from our our live stream audience. And one I think is very interesting because it really kind of maybe speaks to me, is how do you compartmentalize the emotional aspect, seeing trauma in your community and being able to be that first responder and to perform at a high level? So how do you deal with your own kind of, you know, how do you separate the emotion of what you're getting ready to do? Because when I saw that video and you talked about putting this long strand of like gauze tape into a wound and taking it out and putting it back and taking it out, how do you do that and keep your calm and do what's needed to be done? So that's this question.
Okay, that's interesting. I think so. One thing I think I want to say in response to that is that a lot of emergency professionals are trained to compartmentalize. We don't actually do that.
Okay.
We don't compartmentalize because it's, you know, for when we go out and help people, it's not our job. It's something we're doing because of how we want to participate in the community in which we live, right? And so I think the question is getting at how do you protect yourself, possibly, or it may be getting to how do you account for the emotional aspects of responding. And so if you come, for example, to our basic gunshot wound workshop, there's a whole section we do about what it's like for the person who is injured, and how do you say to them, what do you say to them? How do you relate to them, what they're going through? We talk about what the witnesses may be experiencing and how do you deal with witnesses and what are some of the common reactions you might receive, and how do you spread calm in that situation? We talk about, and we talk a lot about you as a responder. If you actually step up to do that, what might you be going through? And what are the resources for you, either institutional, organizational resources, or even like coming to us? And what are the considerations for you after you have done this? And in our advanced workshop, we even have a section about if you're someone who receives that phone call for someone who just responded, what are some tips for you to hold space for that person? So those are some of the things that we get into. And so we actually don't compartmentalize because all that is happening in the same space.
Mhm,
And it's, it is emotional.
mhm,
But, mainly want to, try to remain calm ourselves
mhm,
so that we can, again, infect that positive infection
mhm,
of that calm to the person that is going through it the most,
mhm.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah, yeah, I at least when I teach these workshops definitely don't encourage that. Really,
You know
and
what? Encourage what?
the
Compartmentalization.
compartmentalizing of the experience and the struggle that you're going through in the moment. To build is to destroy, and to destroy is to build, right? So we gotta just work through those sometimes at the start of almost every workshop. And my grandfather can strike me down if I'm lying.
Mhm.
My voice gets shaky, right? I use that emotion, that experience to fuel, right? Because if I revel in it, that's me settling, right? I know that there's a better tomorrow, and I'm gonna cry today about it.
Okay, thank you. So we have another question from the audience.
Yes, I'm really curious on if Ujima Medics has thought about integrating mental health first aid into their work.
Yeah. So first of all, we have thought about that. And we even workshopped some things, internally about how to do that. At a certain point, we have to make decisions about what's the most important things for us to focus on. And that came up during our challenges conversation. And so at that time, we found that there seemed to be a lot of energy toward training people, spreading information about how to respond to a mental health crisis, mental health emergency. So we said, it seems like a lot of people are doing this. There's some energy for this. There's resources for this. Is this a space where we're needed? Our perspective is changing a bit about that. So we might actually pick that up and pursue that again. Thank you for that question.
Yes. Okay, so we have one more, and this is a good question to kind of end us and lead you maybe into your final comments, I think, because this person wants to, it says, wonderful work that you're doing, and how can we expand this to our communities? And how can we have you all come and support, train in our community? So this is coming from somebody on the live stream.
Okay, great. So that is a good thing to end with. And so I'm not sure where this person is, and I'm not sure what aspect of the work we do is speaking to you, but there might be a street med collective where you are. A lot of the street med collectives do focus mainly on supporting people's right to protest and to get involved in direct action and protect people while they do that. So there might be a collective where you are that you can just kind of like support, jump onto. Groups like Humedics, there's not a whole lot, particularly in the past year or two. There've been, we've learned about some emerging groups. One group I encourage you to reach out to if you happen to be in California. It's called People's Community Medics, based in Oakland. There's a group in Atlanta called Community Movement Builders. I think they have a street medic training. If you're in Louisville, there's a group, I think the local Black Lives Matter chapter is starting to do some first aid trainings. And we're a community with folks in different places who've brought our training to their organization. So if you're interested in working with us specifically, send us an email, do a workshop request form. We can get into that. Right here is how you can find us. On Instagram is where we do the most updates. You see lots of pictures and videos. We do some updates on Facebook as well. If you're touched by what you saw today, you want to give us a donation, that's our PayPal. Our website, we're going to be updating that really, really soon, but you can use that contact us form on the website. It will reach us. And then if your donation needs to be tax deductible, you can make that donation via our fiscal sponsor, Black Hoops Alliance. Okay. But yes, you can also send us an email, and we'll get you our workshop request form.
Thank you so much. This has been so useful. I learned an awful lot. Okay. Thank you. Yay.
Okay.